4454. What cruising altitude is appropriate for VFR-On-Top on a westbound flight below 18,000 feet? A. Even 1,000-foot levels. B. Even 1,000-foot levels plus 500 feet, but not below MEA. C. Odd 1,000-foot levels plus 500 feet, but not below MEA. The correct answer is B. For VFR-On-Top operations on a westbound flight below 18,000 feet, the appropriate cruising altitude would be odd 1,000-foot levels plus 500 feet, but not below the minimum EnRoute altitude, MEA. This ensures vertical separation from other traffic and helps maintain safety in the airspace. 4455. What reports are required of a flight operating on an IFR clearance specifying VFR-On-Top in a no-radar environment? A. The same reports that are required for any IFR flight. B. All normal IFR reports except vacating altitudes. C. Only the reporting of any unforecast weather. The correct answer is A. When operating on an IFR clearance specifying VFR-On-Top in a non-radar environment, the pilot is required to make the same reports as any IFR flight. This includes reporting position, altitude changes, and any unforecast weather conditions encountered. It is important to comply with the reporting requirements specified by Air Traffic Control, ATC, and maintain communication as necessary for the safe conduct of the flight. 4457. What minimums must be considered in selecting an altitude when operating with a VFR-On-Top clearance? A. At least 500 feet above the lowest MEA or appropriate MOCA, and at least 1,000 feet above the existing meteorological condition. B. At least 1,000 feet above the lowest MEA, appropriate MOCA, or existing meteorological condition. C. Minimum IFR altitude, minimum distance from clouds, and visibility appropriate to altitude selected. The correct answer is C. When operating with a VFR-On-Top clearance, you must consider the minimum IFR altitude for the airspace you are operating in. This ensures vertical separation from other IFR traffic. Additionally, you must maintain a minimum distance from clouds to ensure visibility and avoid potential hazards. The specific visibility requirements will depend on the altitude you have selected and any applicable regulations or airspace restrictions. 4643. When operating under IFR with a VFR-On-Top clearance, what altitude should be maintained? A. The last IFR altitude assigned by ATC. B. An IFR cruising altitude appropriate to the magnetic course being flown. C. A VFR cruising altitude appropriate to the magnetic course being flown and as restricted by ATC. The correct answer is C. If VFR conditions on top are specified in the ATC clearance, the pilot must maintain the proper VFR altitude or flying level in accordance with 14 CF or 591.159, which outlines the VFR hemisphere rule. 4643-1. ATC has approved your request for VFR-On-Top while on an IFR clearance. Therefore, you A. should set your transponder to code 1200. B. Must fly appropriate IFR altitudes. C. Must fly appropriate VFR altitudes. The correct answer is C. ATC has approved your request for VFR-On-Top while on an IFR clearance. Therefore, you should fly appropriate VFR altitudes. When you receive approval for VFR-On-Top while operating on an IFR clearance, you are authorized to fly at VFR altitudes of your choosing, provided you maintain appropriate vertical separation from other traffic. This means you should select altitudes appropriate for your direction of flight and follow VFR altitude rules. However, It's important to note that you should still comply with any specific altitude instructions given by ATC and maintain safe separation from other aircraft.